The sky over the Boone Ranch boiled with thunder that night, a black, heaving mass of clouds that split the heavens with streaks of lightning. Each flashed through the land into sharp, ghostly relief: the barbed wire fences, the empty corral, and the lonely figure of a woman running through the storm. Lydia Mae Boone's breath came in ragged gasps, her chest burning as she stumbled through the mud with her little girl's hand clutched tight in hers. Rosie's small boots splashed through puddles, her face streaked with tears and rain, her curls plastered to her cheeks. Behind them, the wind carried the echo of hooves, distant but getting closer. "Keep running, baby," Lydia whispered, her voice trembling as much as her hands. "Don't look back, no matter what." She could taste the iron of fear in her mouth, could feel the sting of the rope burns on her wrists where Caleb had tied her earlier that day. Punishment for talking back. He'd been drinking again, same as always when the rage took him. But this time, his rage had turned toward Rosie, and that, Lydia decided, was the line no mother would ever let be crossed again. A lightning flash split the world open for half a heartbeat, and Lydia saw the shape of the ranch house behind her. The porch lamp still burned, a pale glow against the black night, and beside it, she could just make out a tall figure standing in the doorway. Even from that distance, she knew the stance: shoulders broad, hat tilted low, and a shotgun cradled in one arm. Caleb Boone. Lydia. His voice ripped through the storm like a whip crack, cruel and certain. "You think you can take my daughter from me?" Lydia's grip tightened around Rosie's hand. "He's coming," the child whispered, her voice small and broken. "I know, sweetheart," Lydia said, pulling her close for a moment, the rain plastering their skirts together. "But the Lord didn't make us to live in fear." Her voice shook, but the fire in her heart was new, a mother's resolve forged in years of silence and bruises. They darted toward the canyon path, where the land fell away into a narrow trail carved by stormwater and cattle hooves. The wind howled through the rocks like some ancient spirit calling out her name. Her dress snagged on thorns, tore in places, but she didn't stop. Rosie stumbled once, nearly falling, but Lydia scooped her up, heart pounding, muscles screaming. Far behind, a gunshot rang out, one single, deafening crack that sent a flock of crows screaming from the trees. The echo rolled through the valley like thunder. Caleb was warning her. The rain grew heavier, sheets of silver hammering down as if the heavens themselves wanted to wash away her sins, her fear, her pain. Lydia didn't know where she'd go, only that she'd keep moving. She'd heard of a place, a dusty little town called Dust Creek, half a day's walk south if she followed the riverbed. They said the law didn't reach that far, but maybe mercy did. Her boots slid on the slick rock, her breath coming in sobs. "Mama, I'm tired," Rosie whimpered against her shoulder. "I know, baby," Lydia said softly, tears mixing with rain. "Just a little longer. We'll find someone who'll help us. I promise." But in her heart, Lydia Mae Boone knew no one in these parts dared cross her husband. Caleb Boone wasn't just feared, he owned fear. And yet, somewhere in that black horizon, she prayed there was one soul brave enough to stand against him. Lightning tore across the sky again, and for the briefest moment, the canyon lit up in pale blue light. A mother, her child, and the long, endless road of freedom ahead. The storm swallowed them whole as they vanished into the night, and behind them, Caleb Boone saddled his horse. No one in Dust Creek knew it yet, but before the week was done, that storm would find them to. Dawn crept over the horizon like a shy promise, painting the desert in bruised shades of violet and gold. The rain had passed, leaving behind a world scrubbed raw. The riverbeds glimmered like veins of silver, and the air carried the heavy scent of wet sage and red dust. Lydia Mae Boone trudged along the narrow trail that wound toward Dust Creek, her skirts caked with mud, her boots split at the seams. Rosie slept against her shoulder, her small arms looped trustingly around her mother's neck. Ahead, the land opened wide, a desert framed by rust-colored mesas, jagged like the teeth of some sleeping beast. In the distance, Lydia saw the faint sprawl of a settlement, a handful of weather-beaten buildings crouched along the main street, smoke rising from a blacksmith's forge, a lone church steeple leaning like a weary sentinel. Dust Creek, a town that had once thrived when cattle drives thundered through, but now it sat quiet, worn thin by time and drought. As Lydia approached, she could almost feel the weight of its silence. The wind stirred up spirals of red dust that danced down the empty road. A mangy dog lifted its head from beside a trough, then went back to sleep. The saloon doors swung idly in the breeze, their hinges creaking like tired bones. Inside those walls lived the lost, cowhands who'd gambled away their souls, widows who prayed for letters that never came, and men with bounty posters carrying their names. Dust Creek was a place where sinners hid and saints got forgotten, where folks spoke in low tones and didn't ask too many questions. To Lydia, it looked like salvation, or at least the chance to disappear. But she knew Caleb Boone's reach stretched long and mean. His riders would be hunting her by now, their tracks cutting through the mud and sand. She had to find shelter before nightfall. As she walked into the heart of Dust Creek, clutching Rosie close, she whispered a silent prayer that this lonely, broken town might show her more mercy than the world she'd left behind. Somewhere among its secrets, she hoped, was a place where fear no longer ruled her life. Before the running, before the bruises and the storms, Lydia Mae had once believed in love, the kind sung about in Sunday hymns and whispered under starlit skies. She'd grown up on a small homestead east of the river, the daughter of a quiet farmer who raised her to work hard and keep faith. She'd been just 17 when Caleb Boone first rode into her life, tall, handsome, and smiling in that easy way that made a girl forget to breathe. His voice was low and sure, his words full of promise. "A woman like you shouldn't have to break her back in a field," he'd said, tipping his hat. "You deserve a home, someone to look after you." Lydia had believed him. Everyone in the county knew Caleb Boone, a rancher with more cattle than he could count, and a reputation for getting what he wanted. When he asked for her hand, her father hesitated, but Caleb's charm was honey over steel. Within weeks, Lydia became Mrs. Boone, trading her father's weathered cabin for Caleb's sprawling ranch house built of pine and pride. For a while, she thought she'd stepped into a dream: new dresses, fine furniture, her own piano. Caleb would laugh and kiss her forehead, whispering, "You're my lucky charm, darlin'." But the dream soured fast. It started small, a slammed door, a sharp word. Then came the questions about where she'd been, who she'd spoken to, why she smiled at the grocer. His voice turned harsh, his hands restless. One night, when she tried to stand up for herself, he shoved her so hard she hit the wall. The next morning, he brought her roses. "You know I didn't mean it, Lydia. You make me crazy, is all." She told herself he'd change, that it was the whiskey, the pressure, the long days. But the cycle deepened, apologies soaked in lies, bruises hidden under sleeves. Then came Rosie, her sweet salvation. The first time Lydia held her daughter, she felt the warmth of something pure. For years, Rosie was the only light in that dark house. Lydia learned to hide her tears, to move quietly, to protect her child's laughter like a secret flame. Until one night, Caleb's rage turned on the little girl. Rosie had dropped a dish at supper, the shatter echoing through the kitchen. Caleb's temper snapped, a sudden, monstrous crack across his daughter's cheek. Lydia froze for half a heartbeat, the world going silent around her. Then something deep inside her broke, not with fear, but with fury. She stepped between them, eyes blazing. "Don't you ever touch her again." That night, while Caleb slept off his whiskey, Lydia packed what little she could: a blanket, a loaf of bread, the locket her mother gave her. She woke Rosie, pressed a finger to her lips, and whispered, "We're leaving, baby." It was the first decision she'd made in years that belonged only to her. And as she led her daughter into the cold night, Lydia Boone vowed she would rather die running than live another day in fear. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of dust and silence broken only by the whisper of wind through dry grass. Lydia's breath came in shallow bursts as she carried Rosie across the barren plains, her boots cutting deep into the sand. Days had passed since they'd fled the ranch. Nights were colder than sin, days blistering under a merciless sun. They had no horse, no wagon, only each other, and the stubborn will to keep moving. At first, Lydia thought she'd lost them, Caleb's men. But on the second night, she saw the flicker of firelight on the horizon and knew they were close. The Boone ranch hands were loyal to their master out of fear more than respect. She could almost hear Caleb's voice ringing in their ears. Find her, bring her home, or don't come back at all. Lydia and Rosie hid in the canyons by day, moving only when darkness cloaked the land. They drank from muddy creek water, shared crumbs of bread gone hard, and prayed the wind would cover their tracks. Each sound in the night, a coyote's cry, the crack of a branch, sent a shiver down Lydia's spine. She'd hold Rosie close, whispering, just a little farther, baby, just a little more. Once, from the edge of a ridge, Lydia spotted riders, 5 of them, silhouetted against the dying light. She ducked low, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The hoof beats echoed through the canyon like drums of doom, fading, then returning again. There was no rest, no peace, only the chase. By the 4th day, Dust Creek's weathered rooftops appeared in the distance, salvation within reach. But even as hope stirred, a darker truth crept in. Caleb's men were only hours behind. The storm clouds were gathering again, and Lydia Mae knew she would have to face more than just the rain. Before dawn came, Dust Creek wasn't kind to strangers, especially ones who looked like they'd lost everything. By the time Lydia and Rosie stumbled into town, the last of their bread was gone, and their feet were raw from walking. Lydia's body trembled with exhaustion, but Rosie's hunger gnawed harder than fear. As dusk fell, Lydia sat her little girl in the shadows behind the old livery stable, whispering, "Stay right here, sweetheart. Mama's gonna find us some food." But before she could stand, Rosie shook her head, her small hand clutching her stomach. When Lydia turned to fetch water, Rosie slipped away. The saloon at the heart of Dust Creek was the kind of place where lawmen came to forget they had consciences, and outlaws came to remember they still had a pulse. Smoke hung thick in the air, curling around lanterns and whiskey breath. Cards slapped against tables, coins clinked, and laughter rolled like thunder. Then the doors creaked open, and in walked a child. Every sound died. The piano went silent mid-note. Rosie, small and pale under the lamplight, stood at the threshold, her eyes wide, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of her torn shawl. The men stared, unsure if they were seeing a ghost or a mistake. At the back table sat Flint Maddox, broad-shouldered, scarred, and silent. His reputation carried further than his voice ever did. Folks whispered he'd killed 7 men, maybe more. His hat shadowed his face, but the firelight glinted off the scar that ran from his temple down to his jaw, a reminder of the life he'd lived and the sins he carried. Rosie's small feet tapped against the creaky floorboards as she crossed to him, her courage the size of her heart. "Mister," she said softly, her voice quivering but steady, "please, save my mama." A murmur rippled through the saloon. Every man turned to see what Flint Maddox would do, laugh, curse, or throw the girl out. But he did none of those things. He just looked at her. Something in those tearful blue eyes cut through the years of whiskey and regret. The outlaw blinked once, slowly, as if seeing himself reflected in the child's fear. He set his glass down with a quiet thud and pushed his chair back. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Rosie pointed toward the alley, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. Flint stood, every man in the room, staring in disbelief. The most feared gunman in the territory, the one even sheriffs avoided, was walking toward the door because a little girl had asked him to. And for the first time in Dust Creek's long, dusty memory, an outlaw did something that made the whole town hold its breath. The wind rose like a living thing that night, sweeping across the mesas and howling through the canyons. The storm had come early, black clouds boiling over the horizon as lightning clawed at the sky. Flint Maddox rode straight into it, the hooves of his horse pounding against the earth like a heartbeat that matched his own. He didn't know why he'd agreed to help. He only knew that when that little girl's voice cracked with fear, something deep inside him, something he thought had long since died, had stirred awake. He rode hard, following the narrow trail that led south out of Dust Creek. He'd been a tracker once, before whiskey and gunfights turned his name into legend, and he knew the look of a hunted woman's trail. Torn fabric on a sage branch, fresh footprints in the mud. He followed them until he saw movement near the canyon ridge, a flash of pale fabric. A figure pressed against the rocks. Lydia Mae crouched low, holding Rosie behind her, eyes wild as the storm. The sound of approaching riders thundered through the darkness. Caleb's men had found them. Flint dismounted, sliding his rifle free. "Stay down," he called out, his voice rough but steady. Lydia turned, her face streaked with rain and fear. She didn't know who this stranger was or why he'd come, only that his stance was not that of a hunter but of a man ready to stand his ground. The first shot cracked through the storm, then another. Muzzle flashes lit up the night like fireflies. Flint's rifle roared back in answer, echoing off the canyon walls. One rider fell. Another wheeled his horse and vanished into the dark. But there were too many. Flint ducked behind a rock, firing again and again until his rifle clicked empty. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him sideways. He hit the dirt hard, blood mixing with rain, but he didn't stop. He drew his revolver, teeth clenched, and shouted, "Run, miss. Take the girl." Lydia froze, torn between terror and disbelief. This outlaw, the stranger, was bleeding for her. She saw his hand trembling as he reloaded, saw the grim determination in his eyes, and for the first time since she'd fled the ranch, she felt something stronger than fear. Courage. She grabbed Rosie and pulled her toward cover, her heart pounding in rhythm with the storm. Flint kept firing until the last echo of hoof beats faded into the rain. The wind carried only the sound of thunder and his ragged breathing. When Lydia crawled to him, he was slumped against the rocks, blood seeping through his sleeve. "You're hit," she whispered. He gave a weak grin. "Ain't the first time, Mum. Won't be the last." "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why help us?" Flint looked past her at the horizon, where lightning split the world in two. "Because somebody's gotta do what's right," he said softly. "And I reckon tonight that somebody's me." The storm raged around them, but for the first time, Lydia Mae felt the faint flicker of hope. Maybe not all men were monsters after all. Dawn crept slow and ghostly over Dust Creek, the kind of morning when the world seemed to hold its breath. The storm had passed, leaving the streets slick with mud and silence. Folks gathered at the edge of town, whispering beneath their hats as Flint Maddox rode in, pale and grim, with Lydia and little Rosie behind him in a borrowed wagon. No one spoke. Even the saloon keeper, who'd seen everything from gunfights to hangings, couldn't find words. Everyone had heard the talk. Caleb Boone was coming. Flint dismounted outside the livery, every motion deliberate, his wounded arm bound in a strip of linen. He turned to Lydia. "You don't have to face him," he said quietly. "Yes, I do," she replied, voice steady but eyes bright with tears. "If I keep running, he still owns me. That ends today." The townsfolk parted as Caleb Boone rode in on his black stallion, boots gleaming, hat low over his brow. He looked every inch the tyrant, a man used to control, to fear, to getting what he wanted. His eyes found Lydia, and his mouth curled into a sneer. "You think you can stand in front of me? After all I done for you?" Lydia's heart hammered, but she didn't move. Flint stepped forward, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "She ain't yours to break anymore, Boone," he said. Caleb laughed, the sound hard and mean. You're gonna tell me that? You're a murderer, Maddox. Ain't no better than me." Flint's expression didn't change. Slowly, he turned to Lydia and held out his revolver. The grip gleamed dull in the dawn light. "You end this," he said softly. "Not me." The world went still. Lydia's hand shook as she took the gun. She'd never fired one in her life, but the weight of it felt righteous in her palm. Caleb's sneer faltered for a breath. Maybe he didn't expect she'd have the courage to face him. "Go on." Then, he growled, drawing his own weapon. The sound of metal clicking echoed down the street. One. Then two, like the ticking of a clock counting down to fate. For one frozen heartbeat, Lydia saw every memory, the bruises, the nights of silence, Rosie's tear-streaked face. Then Caleb's hand twitched toward his gun. The shot cracked like thunder. When the smoke cleared, it was Flint who stood steady, gun drawn, eyes cold as the dawn. Caleb Boone lay in the dust, his weapon inches from his hand. One final echo rolled through Dust Creek's narrow streets, and then silence. No one cheered. No one spoke. The people of Dust Creek simply watched as Lydia Mae Boone fell to her knees, trembling, tears streaming down her face, not from grief, but from release. Flint holstered his gun, his voice quiet as the wind. "It's over now, Mum." As the sun rose above the mesas, burning gold over the desert, Lydia finally felt what freedom truly sounded like. The soft, impossible sound of peace. Weeks passed, and the desert began to bloom again after the rains. Dust Creek, once heavy with whispers, now carried a strange kind of peace. The saloon had its laughter back, the blacksmith's hammer rang each morning, and down on Main Street, the new cafe smelled of fresh bread and strong coffee. Inside, behind the counter, Lydia Mae wiped her hands on her apron and smiled as her daughter twirled between the tables. Her laughter bright and clean, a sound the town hadn't heard in far too long. Flint Maddox sat outside beneath the awning, his left arm still in a sling, his hat tipped low against the sun. He looked smaller somehow, quieter, the kind of man who'd made peace with his ghosts. Every morning, Rosie would bring him a cup of coffee, always a little too sweet, and he'd take it with a faint grin. Folks nodded to him now, not with fear, but with something close to respect. One afternoon, Lydia stepped outside, the wind stirring her hair. "I don't reckon I'll ever be able to repay you," she said softly. Flint shook his head, his gaze on the horizon where the mesas burned red in the dying light. "Don't reckon you need to," he murmured. After a pause, he added, "Just make it worth it." And for the first time in a long time, Lydia Mae truly believed she would. The rain had stopped, and Dust Creek lay quiet beneath a silver dawn. Lydia watched the horizon, Rosie's small hand tucked safely in hers. Somewhere beyond those red mesas, men like Caleb still ruled with fear, and men like Flint still carried the weight of redemption. Then the narrator's voice breaks the silence, turning to the viewers. "If it were you, would you have trusted a man with blood on his hands to save your life? Or kept running alone into the desert night, hoping the storm would show mercy?" The question lingers, daring each listener to decide what courage truly means. Every story born of the Wild West carries a truth deeper than dust and blood. That courage wears many faces. It's not only the outlaw who draws fast or the sheriff who stands tall at high noon. Sometimes it's a trembling mother clutching her child, daring to believe she deserves a life beyond fear. Sometimes it's a man the world has condemned, who chooses one selfless act to balance the weight of all his sins. In the end, bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet step forward when the world tells you to turn back. So if Lydia and Flint's story stirred something in your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Tales of the Wild West, and ring that bell for more stories of love, justice, and redemption under the endless western sky.